welcome to Two Beans in a Pod. You know, we're diving deep into a really fascinating set of documents today. The recently released JFK files.
Yeah,
It's a pivotal moment in history,
absolutely.
and we know you share that same curiosity because you asked us to take a closer look.
Yeah.
So that's our mission today,
Right.
to unpack some of the key revelations from these thousands of pages and see what new insights they might offer.
Okay.
Now we've got some great sources for this deep dive, including some articles from The Standard.
Sounds good.
Okay, so just to set the stage, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963, has been a subject of intense debate and countless theories for decades.
Right.
You're probably familiar with the basic narrative.
Yeah.
But these newly unredacted files, they've been released over time with
Right.
a significant batch in recent years,
Yeah.
including under the orders of President Trump,
Yeah,
offer a fresh look even decades later.
definitely.
Now, one of the central figures, of course, is Lee Harvey Oswald, the former Marine who was arrested for the assassination
Right.
and then himself killed just 2 days later.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The official conclusion of a lone gunman has always faced scrutiny,
Always.
and these files touch directly on that aspect.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with perhaps a surprising detail regarding Oswald's time in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
According to a CIA memo from their St. Petersburg station back in 1991,
Okay.
a KGB official reviewed 5 thick volumes of files on Oswald.
Wow, 5.
5 big volumes.
That's a lot of paperwork.
Right, and the takeaway was this KGB official was confident that Oswald was at no time an agent controlled by the KGB.
Interesting.
This directly addresses a significant area of speculation over the years.
It really does.
So what do you think about that?
I think it's fascinating to get that internal perspective.
Right.
You know, it's not an outside analysis, but someone with access to the KGB's own records on Oswald
Right.
making that judgment call.
Right.
Now, we do need to consider the time frame.
Right.
This is 1991 after the Cold War.
Right.
But it still offers us that glimpse into how at least one segment of Soviet intelligence
Right.
viewed Oswald's relationship or lack thereof with them.
Right.
You know, it makes you think what led them to this conclusion based on their own files.
Absolutely. And building on that,
Okay.
the same memo reveals another assessment for the KGB files.
Okay.
They considered Oswald to be a poor shot.
Really?
Yeah, this observation came from their monitoring of him,
Okay.
noting his difficulties with target firing while he was in the USSR.
Interesting.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The very organization that some might suspect of involvement
Right.
apparently had doubts about his marksmanship.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, so does that challenge kind of that prevailing narrative at all?
It really does.
Yeah.
It raises that question, you know, if the KGB, through their observation, deemed him a poor shot, it challenges the idea that he was capable of the precise and rapid shooting
Right.
that was needed for the assassination.
Right.
At least as it's been officially described.
Right.
It really makes you wonder about the level of skill required
Right.
for something like that.
Right.
And, you know, does the KGB assessment line up with other evidence or analysis of Oswald's skills?
Exactly.
It really makes us think, could someone described as a poor shot have pulled this off as a lone gunman?
It's a really, really good question.
Mhm.
And the files also shed more light on Oswald's activities in the weeks leading up to the assassination.
Right.
We have some details concerning his visit to the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City.
Yeah.
A CIA memo describes him phoning the Soviet embassy to inquire about a visa to the Soviet Union.
Okay.
He also visited the Cuban embassy, seemingly exploring options to travel to Cuba as a stepping stone to the USSR.
Interesting.
So this paints a picture of someone actively trying to leave the country.
Right.
What do these embassy visits suggest to you?
I think when we consider these embassy visits
Yeah.
within the context of the Cold War,
Right.
they become even more significant.
Yeah.
Both the Soviet Union and Cuba were ideologically opposed to the United States
Absolutely.
at that time.
Right.
So Oswald's attempts to get passage to these nations in the weeks before the assassination
Yeah.
would definitely have raised a red flag for intelligence agencies.
Right.
It suggests he wanted to maybe align himself
Right.
or seek refuge
Right.
in countries that were hostile to the U.S.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if he was an agent or just ideologically driven.
Right.
It begs the question, were these genuine attempts to defect, or were they part of something more complex?
That's a great question. And then adding another layer to this.
Okay.
A memo dated the day after the assassination mentions an intercepted phone call in Mexico City,
Wow.
where Oswald reportedly communicated with a KGB officer at the Soviet embassy that September. So this, of course, injects even more intrigue
Yeah.
into the question of potential Soviet connections,
Right.
despite that later KGB assessment that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, how do we reconcile those two things?
Yeah. Right. How do we make sense of that?
I think this intercepted call just highlights
Yeah.
how complicated this whole situation is. Even if the KGB later said Oswald wasn't a controlled agent, this communication shows there was some level of contact.
Right.
So it raises questions about what kind of contact.
Right.
Was it just about a visa or was there more to it?
Right.
An intercepted call tells us Oswald was on the radar of intelligence agencies,
Yeah.
both American and maybe Soviet.
Right.
It shows we need to consider all the info
Right.
before making any conclusions.
Absolutely. And, it's important to remember, as Larry J. Sabato from the University of Virginia Center for Politics has pointed out,
Okay.
that analyzing this huge amount of documentation is an ongoing process,
Of course.
and their full significance will take time to understand.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
We're talking about a massive historical record.
Right.
And it's easy to get caught up in the little details that grab our attention. But the real value is in looking at the big picture.
Right.
Looking for patterns corroborating info.
Right.
Understanding the context.
Yeah.
It's historical detective work.
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking. But on a more positive note,
Okay.
Jefferson Morley, who is vice president of the Mary Farrell Foundation,
Right.
sees the release as an encouraging start.
Okay.
He notes that a large chunk of previously redacted documents has now been made public in complete form.
That's good news.
So while analysis takes time, the increased transparency is a definite step forward.
It is. It's huge.
So bringing it back to you, as someone who is so interested in gaining knowledge and understanding,
Yeah.
what does all of this tell us so far?
I think these glimpses into the JFK files paint a more detailed picture of Oswald
You're right.
and give us a peek into how Soviet intelligence saw him at one point.
Yeah.
They might not answer every question,
Right.
but they give us more pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
It's about embracing those nuances rather than looking for easy answers.
We hope you're finding this deep dive into the JFK files as captivating as we are.
I am.
And if you are, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Two Beans in a Pod for more insightful explorations of fascinating topics.
You'd love to have you.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive into the JFK files, we've seen some intriguing details emerge, particularly regarding the KGB's assessment of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
The idea that they didn't consider him an agent and viewed him as a poor shot certainly adds a layer of complexity to that narrative.
It does.
His activities at the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City also provide valuable context to his movements before the assassination.
Absolutely.
This raises an important question for you to consider.
Okay.
How do these newly revealed details shift your own understanding of the events surrounding the JFK assassination?
It's fascinating to think about,
Yeah.
do they reinforce existing beliefs or maybe open up new avenues of thought?
Right.
It's a chance to engage with this historical info and form your own perspective.
Absolutely, and this is really what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the JFK files.
My pleasure.
We hope this has provided you with some surprising nuggets and a clearer understanding of some of the information that has recently come to light.
Definitely.
And if you'd like to join us for more deep dives into fascinating topics,
Yes.
be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Two Beans in a Pod.
We appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod.